and welcome into the Ringerverse, your Nexus feed for all things fandom. I am Ben Lindbergh, senior editor for The Ringer, button mash host, and wearer of fall flannel, bringing you the October 2025 edition of Ringerverse Recommends. We hope you've had fun watching the World Series, or apple picking, or pumpkin carving, or dressing up and trick-or-treating, and the fall fun isn't over, because today we've got some goodies for you. For those listening but not watching, I just dumped out my daughter's Halloween candy. Those are not the treats I'm talking about. You can't have her Halloween candy. However, you can have some great recommendations for nerd culture content released over the last month that we haven't had a chance to cover yet on a full-length episode, because that's what we do here at the end of every month on Ringerverse Recommends. Today's spotlight conversation between me and CBR writer Katie Dahl will be about The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon, which just wrapped up its excellent third season. Its second season is now on Netflix. Katie and I are the last two people in the world watching The Walking Dead diligently, and we're going to tell you why. If you haven't seen Daryl Dixon or watched The Walking Dead in a while, that's okay. This will be a wider-ranging conversation about the rise and fall and future of the franchise, because believe it or not, Halloween was the 15th anniversary of The Walking Dead, and it's still, well, I won't say going strong, but shuffling along. Thanks to those of you who have written in to let me know that you've liked the last couple of episodes with our extended segments on Foundation and Star Trek Strange New Worlds. A few people have told me they missed the old format, and if you do, I've got good news. The old format is essentially still here. It's like Luke says in The Last Jedi, no one's ever really gone. We're still doing what we did before, just with something extra on top. Because the most common requests we got for the first year and a half or so of this show was for a little more interaction and depth. But we do have our usual complement of clips from most of our hosts of the Ringerverse and House of R, and a few of our friends lined up for later in the episode. So if you aren't interested in listening to our chat about The Walking Dead, and I can't imagine why you wouldn't be, you can use the timestamps to skip straight to the clips. I will be back later with my Ringerverse Recommends co-host Grumpkin the Dachshund. That's what we call a tease. I've got to give you a reason to stick around to the end of the episode, but Grum won't be the only reason. I will also be recapping the picks and relaying our listener nominations, which we welcome every month at ringerverserecommends@gmail.com. Now, me, Katie Dahl, Daryl Dixon. Well, back in September, when season 3 of Daryl Dixon premiered, Norman Reedus, who plays Daryl, linked his 3.5 million Twitter followers to a conversation with my guest today, accompanied by the caption, "Katie got it." And as I followed her coverage, I had to agree. Katie did get it. And so I got Katie on the show today. Katie Dahl is a critic who covers TV and movies of all kinds for CBR, with a specialty in The Walking Dead. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, I do consider myself an expert in The Walking Dead.
Yes.
A little bit.
Say it loud, say it proud. This is a safe space. It's okay. We can share here. And we Walking Dead dead enders have to stick together, because it can be lonely out there these days for a Walking Dead watcher in 2025. This franchise has gone from the hottest thing on TV, just the most watched show, and also prestige adjacent, some amount of critical acclaim, to, I would say, something between an afterthought and a punchline. When I tell people I still watch The Walking Dead, if I tell them I still watch The Walking Dead, we have to get to a certain level of comfort with each other before I broach that subject. The reactions I get range from confusion to concern. Either, wait, that show is still on? Didn't that end in 2021? Or, wait, why are you watching that? I don't know if you have had the same experience, but tell me a little bit about how you came to be a Walking Dead watcher, and such a dedicated one that you have stuck through the franchise, or stuck with the franchise through thick and thin.
I have to say, my story to getting to The Walking Dead is a little bit unique, maybe original, completely original.
Okay.
When I was growing up, I did not like horror stuff at all.
Same.
And I thought, I was under the impression The Walking Dead is a very scary show, which in hindsight, it really isn't. It's just a little bit of horror stuff.
Yeah.
But my dad was a big fan of it. He loved it, and I was a teenager when the show was on in its earlier seasons. And every time he would watch it in the living room, I would go the other way. But one Christmas, my mom got him a Walking Dead video game that is not the best of the Walking Dead video games.
Okay.
It is called The Walking Dead Survival Instinct.
Not the Telltale classics.
No, not the good ones. Survival Instinct, I believe, is canon in the Walking Dead universe, but do not quote me on that. I do not know. It features Daryl and Merle, and it's their backstory before they meet the Atlanta group. And for some reason, I was hooked from that game. I would watch my dad play it, and I would think, who is this Daryl guy? I need to watch the show, thinking that he is the protagonist. And then I watched the pilot episode, and I watched the second episode, and I'm like, who is this Rick Grimes guy? And where is Daryl Dixon? Where is the guy that everybody is obsessed over? Because at this point, I think it was season 4 of The Walking Dead was on. So everybody was obsessed. It was like, if Daryl dies, we riot and all that.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how I got into the show. And I loved it. I loved this huge group of characters. I loved how it was not just a zombie show. It was a human show. It showed how characters cope in these terrible times and the relationships they build from it, and how some characters even benefit from living in such a crazy world.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I'm a little older than you, and I got in on the ground floor. I was there from the start. I guess I was in college when the show came on, or maybe a bit after. And I just was watching it from the start. And like you, I'm not a big horror head, but it's not actually that scary. The zombies are slow and mostly easily dealt with. A little less so in season 1, oddly, but still, by the standards of horror or zombies in general, you can handle them. And at this point, I'm in too deep. And maybe it's a sunk cost, but I have been with these characters for so long, specifically Daryl and Carol, 2 of the lone survivors from the original show and the first season. And now, I tell people I've started a career, a family since then. Everything has changed. This is one of the constants in my media consumption. I met Daryl Dixon before I met my wife and the mother of my child, So this is a long-term relationship, and I can't quit Daryl now. And so I've got to stick it out. But what do you think happened? What would you diagnose if we look at the rise and fall of The Walking Dead? Do you see it more as, look, it was just a passing fancy and tastes come and go, and certain things are fads and they burn bright and they burn out and people move on to the next thing? Or do you see it as more of a story of squandering the goodwill and the popularity, failing to capitalize on what was there?
I definitely don't think it was a fad that just went out of style, because as we've seen in most recent years, we have The Last of Us, which, we'll talk about Daryl Dixon, the actual spinoff, later, and there's a lot of similarities there, but people are so drawn to The Last of Us, and they love it. They love this apocalyptic stuff. I think The Walking Dead could have been on the same wavelength as it was in its peak in season 5 for 11 seasons. I think what happened was it did kind of get a little bit of an ego. It did kind of think, people will stick around for as long as possible because they have stuck around for this long. Problem is they didn't. They made some brave, creative choices that a lot of people did not agree with. They did not really capitalize on maybe sticking to shorter episodes or shorter seasons. They really stuck with that 16 episode count, which in hindsight I do love, but it really just kept things lingering for so long.
It's a big investment.
Yeah. And I think some character arcs just kind of needed to end at some point, but the show just kept them going. And there are some characters who are still hanging on by a thread.
It's true. Yes, there's a certain amount of plot armor involved here, certainly. I think if you talk to people who were Walking Dead watchers at a certain point and hopped off, the most common answer or the most common explanation would be end of season 6, start of season 7, right? Negan, Glenn, the brutality of all of that, how dark and hopeless it got. So that was where it lost a lot of people. But then I think there was a certain amount of repetition. There was a certain sense of, okay, there's a new community this season. There's a new antagonist. We're in a new world with someone who meant well, but just got a little drunk on power. And suddenly they're worse than the walkers, right? And rinse and repeat and go somewhere else and do the same sort of thing. And, contrive ways to keep fan favorites alive and keep bringing them back. And I think a lot of people wondered, what is this building towards, if anything? And that's kind of been a defining question for this franchise. Going back to the start, the CDC, and are we looking for a cure, or are we just accepting that this is a fallen world? And then are we trying to just survive? Are we trying to rebuild? What is this all aiming toward? And that's still an open question, which we can probably discuss at a certain point. But I think people just came to feel like this is doom and gloom, and I've seen it before. And what is it giving me that I haven't gotten already?
Yeah. And it's really unfortunate. A lot of people kind of fell off after season 7 and the whole Glenn thing, because there were some good moments, I would say, in season 9 with the Whisperers.
Yeah.
I think that really brought something different to the whole pattern of, a new community coming in. No, we actually have a cult now of people who dress with the skin of the dead. They're a little bit out there. They're really crazy. I mean, to put it lightly. But then it does fall off a little bit again when it comes to the Commonwealth stuff. And it just falls into old habits that it just can't break. And I think even now with some of the spinoffs, it still falls into those habits. But
yeah.
Like you, I am in a committed relationship with these characters. I cannot leave them, as toxic as it is. This is the relationship that has defined my young adult life and my teenage life. I am in it for the long run.
And it's frustrating for those of us who are sort of committed cultists at this point. When we do detect some improvement and when we try to say, hey, no, this is the time to get back on board, it's gotten good again. It's sort of a re-apex, as my boss, Bill Simmons, might put it. But it's a tough sell for people because do they have to actually watch several seasons to catch up with there's so much material, there's so much lore. Granted, you don't need to be a completist the way that we are maybe, but it can be tough to persuade people, oh, this show that you liked several years ago, yeah, it's still on, and there's actually a good version of it now. Maybe you should get back on board. It just feels like that ship has sailed.
Yeah, I think Angela Kang coming in as showrunner for season 9 was a real, good reboot for the series. It was a soft reboot. I could go on about season 9, how good it was. But I also think season 9 had the infamous departure of Andrew Lincoln as Rick Grimes, which that became a whole debate of, does a show kind of fall off when the protagonist leaves? Can the supporting characters really support it in more than a supporting role? And I don't know if The Walking Dead ever really answered that. I think it held on for as long as possible, but there was that whole thing when Rick left. It was like, okay, where is Rick? Mm-hmm. That's all the show was at this point. I think the franchise is still at this point, even though we got a conclusion with Rick. It's like, okay, what does every other character have to do with Rick now? And it's like, we're kind of, going in circles here.
Yeah, it's Walking Dead Poochie. It's just when Rick's not on the screen, everyone should be wondering where Rick is, essentially. And maybe he's gone back to his home planet. But speaking of ships sailing, I guess that brings us to Daryl Dixon. And that felt like a fresh start. When Daryl Dixon season 1 arrived, that felt like a time where people could get back on board, even if they had ditched the original show. It was a new setting. It's Euro trip. It's Daryl goes to France. We actually covered it, Mallory and I, on House of R. And it felt like, okay, this is sort of a glimmer of creativity and something we haven't seen before. And I really liked it when it premiered. Season 2, I think, felt prey to some of the same, are we settling back into old patterns? For those who don't know, this is, I guess, the 6th spinoff of The Walking Dead. And it was originally envisioned as Daryl and Carol. And as the title says, it would feature Daryl and Carol. And then Carol couldn't make it for season 1, so it was just Daryl. But then Carol joined in season 2, and now it is Daryl and Carol, but not in name. And I felt like, okay, this is bold. This is a new direction. Just being somewhere other than the forests of Georgia, just a different look at least, and a different cast and a different goal. This felt fresher to me than the franchise had felt in years. How did you feel about it when it came along? And how did you feel about it heading into season 2 and then even season 3?
Oh, I completely agree with you. It was such, it was just a nice change of scenery,
Yes,
literally
literally.
and
Yeah.
figuratively. At that point we had gotten Dead City. I believe Dead City premiered before Daryl Dixon. And Dead City was great. But it was still kind of like the old grungy, oh, we're just like going through buildings and not
Yeah.
really looking at all the cool landmarks of New York. But with Daryl Dixon, we literally have this very redneck American go in, and he's in this whole new environment, whole new culture. And we're seeing him fish out of water, quite literally. He shipwrecks in the first episode. And it's so, I have to give the show credit for really paying attention to the culture of France in the first episode and hiring natives from France and committing to all these characters speaking French when they're not around Daryl, because why in the world would they speak English when he's not around? And I really enjoyed it. I really gave the show some praise. I did think it had some hiccups here and there, but what Walking Dead show doesn't at this point. So in season 2, I was excited because, Carol, we finally got her. She was supposed to be here all along, but she's disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when some of the problems started. And I have to say this, please, Daryl and Carol, especially Carol fans, I do not hate Carol. I love Carol. She is such an amazing character.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow along the way with bringing Carol in, nobody knew how to put her in this story. It was pretty much, okay, we have a big problem. We have Daryl with all these characters. We have Carol somewhere else in like Greenland.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to figure out how to put her in there. So they were like, let's just kill every character.
Yeah.
Let's just do that. Let's just go start fresh. And that's where I started getting very frustrated, because it felt like we built up all these amazing characters. Isabel is probably, in my mind, the best original character of the current spinoffs. I think she was so well written, being like a thief turned into a nun in the apocalypse. And then she died, which was so sad. Spoilers, I'm so sorry. For anybody who cares. But then going into season 3, I did not have high expectations. I was like, I don't know if this is going to work out. And it did.
It did.
Season 3, I mean, I was eating my words. I really was. I was saying, you know what? I was wrong. Season 3 is good. They moved to Spain and they did the whole reboot again as if it was season 1 all over again. And I was like, okay, I like these characters. I think they put Daryl and Carol in here in a very fitting way where they just didn't overpower anyone. This is what I want out of a Walking Dead spinoff. Again, I think there are some issues, but I don't think it was bad by any means. Like, I would recommend this. Very fitting for this segment. Yes. I would recommend this.
I would too. Yeah, this is one of my favorite seasons of The Walking Dead, period. Not just of this show, but of the franchise, really, which is semi-high praise, at least given how many seasons and how many shows there have been. And look, I'm very into the Daryl Carol relationship just because it's been such a long time with these characters. They have so much history, so many ups and downs. I'm always into a platonic male-female friendship on TV because it's just so rare, I just like the anti when Harry met Sally, can they be friends? Yes, they can, even though they are arguably heterosexual. I know Daryl, it's kind of up for debate. Is he asexual? He's been embraced by that community as well. But the fact that, no, they don't get together and maybe they develop love interests of their own, like Isabel in Daryl's case, or Antonio this season for Carol. And I like that they have the space to do that. There's a deep love and affection and trust between these characters, but it just doesn't manifest in that way. And that to me just feels not singular, but still unusual even now in popular media. And the change of scenery, the latest change of scenery in the show, it's amazing what a difference shooting on location makes, because it could be the same beats, it can be the same sort of antagonists, but if it's in France, if it's in Spain, if you have this beautiful scenery, if it is shot in this really just artistic, naturalistic way, it's just such a breath of fresh air, really, to port the trappings of that franchise into an entirely new location. Great bit in this season, and we won't spoil too much specifically from season 3, but when we leave them in season 2, they're going through the channel. They're going from France to England. They arrive in England, and it turns out that, as far as we can tell, there is one living human being in all of England, and it's Stephen Merchant, which is just tremendous, just wonderful. And it's interesting to me that, I think of this in video game terms because I cover gaming, but in video games, there's PvE and there's PvP, player versus environment, and player versus player. Are you fighting monsters and computer controlled characters, or are you fighting other human beings who are also playing that game? And usually The Walking Dead turns into sort of a PvP, at least, protagonist versus person, because it's always about, the real monsters are the humans, right? But at the beginning of season 3, there's sort of a PvE interlude where it's player versus environment, really. And it's about, can we navigate this harsh world? Can we sail home? Can we find our way across the water? We're going from England. Now we know they end up in Spain, so obviously things don't go quite as planned. But this whole idea of let's learn to sail and let's just deal with the natural world and all the challenges we're placed in because of the lack of communication and technology. On some level, I'm almost disappointed when it falls back into the rut of we're going to get embroiled in, national politics, for lack of a better term, and tyrants, and we're going to have to save people and rescue people. I kind of like when it's just a small group just ranging around this world trying to survive.
Yeah, and like on a smaller scale, really episode 5 of season 3, which I won't get too much into what that entails, but that is basically person versus environment. How does Daryl figure himself out in an area that he is not familiar with, in an environment that he's never been in America? Which again goes back to, it really benefits from shooting on location because you get this real like spaghetti Western vibe from shooting there. And it does kind of go back into like the person versus person conflict. But for the most part, it is just these people trying to survive and trying to find basic, necessities. And I think that's what The Walking Dead has really been missing for quite some time. And, you were mentioning how good it is to shoot on site. And I think that's one thing that Daryl Dixon does differently than, I would say, the latter half of The Walking Dead. Because, on The Walking Dead, they shot in Georgia for, I believe, the entire series.
Mm-hmm.
But they moved to Virginia at some point, and then they moved to Ohio for the Commonwealth. And it's like very obvious they're not in Virginia.
There's no visual differentiation, right?
Yeah. And look, I live and I grew up in Tennessee, so that's very nostalgic for me to see these empty roads and to see this beauty and all the ugliness. But there comes a point where I'm like, this is just not what I signed up for. This is not Georgia. I can tell. It's very obvious. Whereas, dumb little American me, I'm like, oh yeah, that's Spain. That's Spain. I can tell.
Sure.
Yeah, but I mean, episode 5 kind of had mixed reactions. I think a lot from Carol and Daryl shippers, which I also have to defend you here because people are going to come for you about the Carol and Daryl ship. I live in the mindset of, if it happens, cool. If it doesn't, I'm also cool with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine. People can get mean about Carol and Daryl ship because people think they just belong together romantically. I'm like, but they have such a great friendship. Right. Why would they do that? And I talked to Norman Reedus some months ago, and he was the one who brought up the Carol and Daryl ship. I did not ask him. I did not poke the bear there. And he kind of insinuated like, yeah, why would Daryl ruin such a good friendship by doing that? Mm-hmm. And those are, paraphrasing his words, not mine, but it doesn't seem like the show is going there. And I think we kind of need to accept that at this point. And similar to like where is Rick in the final season of the seasons of The Walking Dead. Daryl Dixon is kind of now like, will Daryl and Carol get together? And it's like, well, the show isn't going there. I don't know why we keep debating it.
Right. Yes. If you want to write fan fiction, by all means. But it does seem that with the text that we have here, I've accepted and embraced that direction. And you did multiple interviews with Reedus. I think he said more words in his interviews with you than Daryl did all season. He tends not to be, the most free-speaking fellow on screen. But it seems like from those conversations that he is still very invested in this character. And I appreciate that after 15 years, after everything, all the trials and travails that Daryl has been through and the ups and downs of the franchise, he still seems to be giving this his all and to be excited about the evolution of the character. And maybe that's because this season, I would say especially, has given him a lot to work with in that respect. And you'd think that it would be tough to really give us character development about a character who has been with us this long and has spent this much time on screen. But there's actually some interesting evolution here, which from the sound of it will be explored further in season 4. But we're getting flashbacks to Daryl's youth. We get kid Daryl and kid Merle in their abusive family situation growing up and how that reflects on the adult Daryl. And he really seems to be wrestling with all of that and coming to terms with all of that. Now, one interesting thing is that even though he does end up becoming a good Samaritan and, getting all up in people's business, the show is more self-aware about that, I would say, than it has been for some time, where Carol is the one who's really pushing, we have to help these people. And Daryl is very much of the mindset, we have to go home. Let's not actually get involved with these people again. And that becomes a conversation in a way that it doesn't typically with this franchise, where they fall into that pattern. But here, Daryl is actually interrogating why that happens and whether he wants that to happen and why he's wired that way, why it is that he always wants to relocate, why he always finds the grass greener or just wants to escape from a situation. And there's at least some hope that maybe he could find peace. Maybe he could settle down at some point. And I found all of that pretty intriguing, given how deep we are into Daryl lore at this point.
Yeah, I found it really interesting as well, especially that conversation between Daryl and Carol in the season 3 finale, where he's very vulnerable, which is so not Daryl at all. Daryl keeps everything within. It's not until we learn about the abuse that his father did onto him and to Merle in like season 3 of The Walking Dead. And we don't even get like really open conversations between the brothers. And I guess in some sense, it does explain why Daryl did leave a whole community in the season 11 finale. Granted, that was just kind of an easy way to get
we need a premise for a spinoff. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I was always under the impression that it was, I got to go find Rick. Rick is out there and I got to go find him. But now the show is kind of backtracking on that and saying, well, I have a lot of trauma that I need to unpack and I don't know how to cope with that, which I really appreciate for a character, for a grown man I assume he's in his 50s in the show, who has not had, the outlet to express all of this. Whereas I think with Carol, I think they're kind of going in circles a little bit with her. I do think there's an improvement in season 3. I didn't particularly like that her coming back into this universe. It was, I'm grieving my daughter again, which is realistic, I would say. It's not totally out there, but it's also something we've kind of already dealt with, and we didn't deal with it in a different way. I guess for her thing is like, how can I find love? How can I find a family again? Because we all know Carol has had the worst time possible with that.
Yes.
I mean, poor Carol. But I do appreciate what they're doing with Daryl, and they're still willing to find new things after 15 years. And every time I've talked to Norman, he seems so excited to get into like these really dark places in Daryl's mind. And he claimed that there's going to be even darker stuff in season 4. So we shall see what that will give us.
Yeah, and there's a production value and an artistry to season 3, which impressed me. And Reedus said it to you, and I'll quote him: "I want to feel the sun on my face. I want to feel the wind in my hair. I don't want to jump to commercials, jump to the scares, jump to who's going to die. I want to be Terrence Malick." So he's aiming high here, highbrow, but there are times where season 3 feels like that. It has that sort of aesthetic, which is not something that I would normally say about this franchise. And, on a moment to moment basis and just on a purely plot level, does this make sense? Because you can talk about kind of the overarching issues with the franchise. And then there's just the episode to episode. Did this kind of contrived situation actually make any sort of logical sense? Why are the zombies suddenly silent ninjas in this scene and not that scene, right? And just so many frustrating moments. You could go back to Rick and all of his preposterous plans and just, why did you think this would work? And why don't you do this? And maybe that's part of the fun and also the frustration of watching. There's less of that this season, I would say, where I find myself questioning plot holes and does this actually follow? There are still moments. I did find myself wondering why boats are so scarce in Europe. Why is there one working boat in all of England and Spain, seemingly, right? It seems like everyone's dead. There's a lot of coastline here. It can't be that hard to find a functioning boat, but that's one of those things that you just have to do to kind of keep the story moving, introduce some artificial scarcity. But I find it to be a little less egregious in this show than I typically do. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I think this season, while there are some plot holes here and there that make me question some things, I do think the show makes up for it with the new characters that we have and the fact that they have such an interesting storyline going on. I do think there are some things like the main enemy whose name is I think his name's Guillermo. He's like the royalty guy. I'm like, okay, like I don't know anything about you. Like you'll die at some point probably. But people like Fede and Antonio and Justina and Roberto, I look at these characters and I'm like, these are people. These are not just people who are just plopped down in this world and they're just trying to figure things out. Like they have a legitimate history between them. And I like how Daryl and Carol are wrapped up in their conflicts, but they're not just overshadowing them. They're not just being like, this is the Daryl and Carol show. It's like, no, these are actual supporting characters who are doing their jobs of supporting these protagonists, which I feel like in season 2, the show really didn't know how to balance all these characters. Mm-hmm. And I think that goes back to an issue I had on The Walking Dead, where after a huge time jump, they would introduce all these relationships and all these dynamics. And I'm like, these make no sense. Like, I don't understand why Rosita and Gabriel are together. How did this happen? Whereas I think on Daryl Dixon, they're believable. I can believe that these characters have these relationships and these conflicts with one another.
Yeah, and this was sort of a soft reboot this season, and we will probably be following some of these characters introduced in season 3 in season 4. And I like that Daryl hasn't completely forgotten about his interlude in France, and he will still reference things that happened there. I grew a bit tired of Laurent, who was the kid character, kind of the chosen one character. Mal and I differed on this, but I enjoyed this current cast, I think, a bit more, and I'm intrigued to see where these characters go. And, I guess the question really is where this franchise will go, and maybe we can close there looking ahead, because this is the 15th anniversary this month of The Walking Dead, and Scott Gimple, who has been running the franchise for years, he appeared at a New York Comic-Con panel, and he talked about how the future is bright, or at least he tried to sell that there's a lot of runway left here. He said, it's quite possible we could see this group up here 15 years from now. He compared the Walking Dead universe to the MCU, the DCU. He seemed to suggest, hey, maybe we're just halfway through. Maybe we're just getting started here. He said, there are many more continents to visit. It's about how the characters evolve over time. It's really exciting to see how far we can take this. Even with characters who have done so many things, we can put them in different worlds where they have different challenges and evolve them through these challenges. Now, on paper, I am here for just a different season in a different place of Daryl Dixon for many years to come. I mean, it would get increasingly contrived. Why are they not home? How are they washing up on another shore that they were not aiming for? But, make it like Ride with Norman Reedus, right? Just make it kind of a tour of the world, and everywhere he goes, Daryl gets into some hijinks. But that doesn't seem to be what is happening. At least the immediate future is that this spinoff is ending in season 4. There is one more season being made, at least, of Dead City, and that's it. That's all we know about. There are no future spinoffs on the horizon, as far as we know. Daryl Dixon seems to be winding down. Dead City has been a disappointment to me as a New Yorker. Not that there's any shortage of New York-based media, but I was hoping that we would get kind of the New York treatment, what we've gotten the on-location shooting of Daryl Dixon. It has not been that. It's just a bunch of dark, dingy hallways and very unconvincing special effects, and it really could have been filmed anywhere. And there's no real reason for being for that series, and arguably for the franchise itself. And I guess that's my question to you. What is the animating spirit of this franchise? What is driving it forward? Because, it's kind of a tired joke that The Walking Dead itself has become kind of a zombie franchise just shuffling forward. And that's never been more true, arguably, because what exactly are we watching for? What exactly is this building up toward, if anything? For you, for me, maybe it's sufficient that we're just getting more adventures with our pals Daryl and Carol, or Maggie and Negan for that matter. But where is this headed, if anywhere?
I mean, that's the big question right now among the fandom. Everybody's asking, what in the world are we watching all this for? A lot of people are hoping that there's going to be this big reunion show, like another spinoff or a season 12 of The Walking Dead, which in my mind, I do not think is going to happen. I don't foresee that happening. However, apparently there is some conversation going on with Andrew Lincoln, possibly Scott M. Gimple. So who knows? I could be wrong again about all this. I'm constantly wrong about things with this franchise. But I don't know. I don't need a reunion with all these characters. I certainly don't need a reunion between Rick and Negan, which apparently everybody on this planet Earth wants. I didn't even want a Maggie and Negan show, but here we are. We got it. We got 3 seasons of it right now, or getting it. But I think, honestly, I have to be honest, I do think The Walking Dead still has some spirit left in it. I think it can go maybe not 15 years, maybe 5 more years. And I think it's because people still love apocalyptic stories. People, for some reason, love seeing the world ending.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for this stuff. Yeah.
I love this stuff. Look, I wasn't the biggest fan of Last of Us Season 2. I had some problems with it. I still loved it, though.
Same.
I still watched it.
It's a narrative cheat code, really, because it just has built-in high stakes, right? And so it's, in a way, kind of a shortcut to a compelling story, because there's just the existential threat of all times. And then you can build in a story surrounding that. If you don't have that post-apocalyptic setting, then you actually have to tell a compelling story and have compelling characters and all the rest of it. It's just that the post-apocalyptic setting just amps all of that up. And maybe that's cheap at times, but I can't quit it.
I mean, look, all of these stories, in essence, are kind of the same. We're just telling the same stories, but we keep going back to them because they're just so intriguing. And I think The Walking Dead is so focused on doing something different, on just being different, about putting different things out there. And that's amazing. Obviously, we see that with Daryl Dixon. That's a great thing. I do think, though, The Walking Dead could benefit from probably looking back on the earlier seasons and thinking, why were people into that? Why did we love seeing these group of characters go from these relatively good people in the normal world into some questionable people in the apocalypse? And that's why I keep saying, and I've said this before, I think I wrote an entire article about it. Let's just start fresh. Get rid of all these characters that we have. Let's just say goodbye to Daryl and Carol. As much as I love them, we do have to say goodbye to them at some point. Let's say goodbye to Maggie and Negan and Rick and Michonne, because I know everybody wishes they'll come back. And let's just start fresh with new characters, like Fear the Walking Dead did, which Look, that was also a questionable show in its final seasons, and I stuck through it.
Oh yeah,
I did it.
that
But
was a straw. That was a slog. That was a grind. That tested my resolve more than anything else.
yeah, and I also think Fear the Walking Dead is a little bit responsible for what is going on in the Walking Dead franchise. People watched it and they were like, this franchise has nothing more in it. But look, if we're going to keep going, which it seems like we are, and it seems like AMC is really counting on The Walking Dead to just keep pushing out content, I think we just got to go with something different. We got to say goodbye to this. I mean, we're comparing it to the MCU and DCU, which I think is just a big mistake. We do not need to be doing that. Just phase 1 over. Let's start phase 2 with something else.
Right. And that is, I guess, the larger conversation surrounding AMC. What else does this network have going for it? This is not the AMC of Mad Men and Breaking Bad anymore, right? And so it does feel like clinging to the last vestige of that with The Walking Dead. But I'm with you, I think. You do have to let the past die at a certain point. Not saying kill it. You don't have to kill it. You can give these characters a happy ending. They've been through enough, I think. And, the ones who live, the Rick and Michonne spinoff was one of the better ones. And it does feel natural to me that after all of the journeys that we have seen these characters go through, that they might make their way to each other again. I don't necessarily need that to be a new show or a new season or a Walking Dead Avengers of some sort. But if they find their way home and they all live happily ever after, that's great. I'm good. Yeah. I'm good with that. And then, yes, maybe you try to start from scratch again and see if you can build up something that people will watch. Because, for a while, it looked like they would be building up the Civic Republic, the group that abducts Rick as the big bad. And then he basically dispatched them, in a couple episodes. And that was that. It looked like they were really introducing fast zombies, 28 Days Later style, which was an interesting, intriguing pivot, at least. And that just hasn't really gone anywhere. Those potential antagonists have fizzled out. And so now we're left with these legacy characters. And it does feel like if you want to keep this going, and I'd be okay if they didn't, if they just say, hey, we had a good run, on to the next thing. Not everything has to live forever. But I'm with you. If they do want to keep it going, then I think there does have to be an injection of new blood at a certain point. That said, I am looking forward to season 4 of Daryl Dixon, at least. And I assume you are too.
Same, especially knowing that it is the end of this show, possibly these characters, which we've known for so long. I mean, I'm probably going to get so emotional over it, over Daryl Dixon, out of all characters on television. That's who I'm going to get emotional over. But yeah, it's exciting. A part of me does want Daryl and Carol to reunite with Rick and Michonne and the whole gang. Would I be okay if they didn't? Of course, it's fine because that's not what this whole show was leading to. But I know that's what people want. That might be what people get. But after all this, I mean, we do only have Dead City, and that's not going to hold up this franchise for very long.
No,
I don't think.
No, it's not.
I think they're talking about a season 4, which, oh boy, yeah. I don't know. That whole show I have a very love-hate relationship with. I love Maggie, I do, but I can't watch any more of the Maggie and Negan show. It's just running in circles.
That's a will they or won't they of a different kind. Will they kill each other finally? Will one of them kill the other? How many times can Maggie stab Negan and then change her mind about...
Exactly. And some people are shipping them, which is awesome. Yeah.
Look, I support people in their endeavors, but I can't join you on that one. Can't go down that road.
It's interesting. Maybe that's what's keeping Dead City going. Maybe. The hope of Maggie and Negan getting together.
Wow. That's a dark, twisted thought to end on. But Katie, this was such a pleasure. And I feel like you and I could probably discuss The Walking Dead at even greater length. I don't know how many other people would like to listen to that. So I will cut this short-ish. And I will just say that this was very cathartic to have this kind of conversation with someone who has this shared history and doesn't judge. And we can kind of come to this on similar terms and have a high-level conversation about this franchise that has meant a lot to us over the years and has certainly taken up a lot of our time at the very least. So I was thrilled to discover someone still recapping this series and this franchise in the year 2025 and taking it seriously and looking at it critically. And it was a pleasure to make your acquaintance and talk to you today, Katie.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you so much for having me and talking about one of my most niche interests at this point. 10 years ago, this would have not been a niche interest, but now it is. So thank you for listening to me rant about The Walking Dead.
Well, would you look at that? Katie and I had such a great time talking about The Walking Dead that my stubble is 3 days longer than it was when we started. That's called a Ringerverse Recommends continuity error. We film these things over multiple days. What do you want from me? I hope that you enjoyed the Walking Dead chat. If you skip straight to the timestamp, how dare you? But one way or another, you have reached the rapid fire recommendations portion of the podcast. And so I will hand off to our leadoff batter, the best leadoff batter not named Shohei Ohtani, Van Lathan.
What's up, everyone? It's Van Lathan. Ringerverse Recommends for the month of October. I'm going with Star Wars Visions. It's another installment in the anthology series. A bunch of different Star Wars stories all together, brought together by just sublime animation, the connective tissue of the Star Wars universe. I was very, very pleasantly surprised that we got to live in it again. And I am recommending it to you. You know what? I give you guys anime. I give you guys Star Wars recommends. There's a lot of animation happening right now. I don't know if I'm changing. It's probably something I should pay attention to. Maybe I'm going too far. But recommends is for me, but Visions is what I'm going to recommend to you right now. Watch it there on Disney Plus. For as long as Disney Plus exists. We don't know how long it's going to be around. It's tough times. So watch Disney Plus, watch Star Wars Visions. You'll have fun.
What's up, Ringerverse? Steve Allman here for the month of October. That's right. The leaves are falling. They're crunchy. And what else is crunchy is my nice Katamari ball that I'm rolling everything up into and throwing it up into the sky to make a star. Once Upon a Katamari is my Ringerverse recommendation for October. That's right. A new Katamari game for the year of our Lord 2025. You never would have thought it, but the music is incredible. It's got some great modern controls. Multiplayer in Katamari game. What? Oh my God. Katamari is probably one of my favorite, most pure gaming experiences that I have left, and they didn't lose the recipe with this one. This is a great, fun time, again, with a killer soundtrack that any fan of the original games would absolutely love. Check it out. Once Upon a Katamari.
What's up, Ringerverse fans? It's Arjuna here with my October recommendation, and I'm going with something that actually came out in September. It's Haunted Hotel on Netflix. It's a new animated comedy from some of the creatives behind Rick and Morty with an excellent voice cast. It's a really short 10-episode show, 20, 25, 30-minute episodes. Easy, fun watch to just kind of throw on, enjoy. It's Halloween time right now. It's kind of a spooky-ish show. And kind of like Rick and Morty, it's, a comedy, but it also has like a really deep lore and background where, just like your Marvel shows and your Star Wars shows, you can kind of dive into the world a little bit and have a lot of fun with it. The show was renewed for a second season, so you can watch it and enjoy and know about there's more coming as well. But I recommend it. It's that time of year where you kind of want a nice, cozy, easy show. It's something that's related to the holidays right now. So check it out on Netflix. That's my recommendation for October.
Hey Ringerverse, it's producer Dev here with my recommendation for this month's Ringerverse Recommends, and I'm coming to you with the Tron Ares soundtrack. Now I know if you listen to Mint Edition, we talked a lot about this movie. There were a lot of flaws, but the one thing we could all agree on was that the soundtrack was absolutely killer. Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross, aka Nine Inch Nails, teaming up to bring you something that's industrial, gritty, steamy. It's like a cyberpunk rave, if you will. Probably the closest we will all get to Berghain in our living rooms. Little opposite of what initially we heard with Daft Punk, which was a little more French touch, a little more polished, orchestral, but still very cool. And these guys can be trusted. They've done soundtracks for movies like Soul, The Social Network, and even Challengers. So do yourself a favor, check out the lead single, As Alive as You Need Me to Be, and the rest of the soundtrack on Spotify or wherever you get your music.
What's up, Ringerverse? It's Matt James, the deputy art lead here at The Ringer and frequent Button Mash guest. Today, I'm going to recommend to you a game called Ball X Pit. I don't know why the X is in there. I'm just going to call it Ball Pit. There's a lot of X's in titles lately that don't need to be there, but Ball Pit is available on pretty much every platform. It's free on Game Pass if you're the other person that still has Game Pass. And it's kind of like a brick breaker roguelite. You kind of bounce balls with your character against a bunch of incoming blocks, and there's a bunch of different skills, and you try to beat each level without dying. And when you finish a level or when you die, you can go back to your town that you build, and you build town buildings that give you a bunch of different upgrades. All the characters do slightly different things. And it is wildly, wildly addicting. I've been trying to play a bunch of different games for Button Mash, and I just kind of played Ball Pit from the moment I started it until I completely finished it without going back to the other games I should have been playing, because it is the best. If you've ever liked a brick breaker game, if you've ever liked a town builder game, if you've ever had an addiction problem, this is the game for you. Ball Pit. Check it out, but make sure that you have time in your life before you check it out.
What's up, bad babies, midnight riders, button mashers, junior mints? It's Mal. I am here for October's Ringerverse Recommends to suggest something that came out in September. Hear me out. Season 3 of Star Wars Visions just dropped. You can hear the Midnight Boys pew pew chat about it on their most recent pod. If you're watching Visions and loving it, and then craving some more recent Star Wars animation, and how could you not be, I would like to direct you to Lego Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy Pieces of the Past. Now, I was inclined to refer to it as Lego Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy Season 2, but turns out the Pieces of the Past part of that title is pretty crucial because it is actually a separate show carousel on the Disney Plus app, which I do not totally understand. This is not in the same shell as Season 1. It is its own entry. Put in Pieces of the Past, find it there. If you do, you'll be treated to another delightful installation. The most recent Lego Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy season dropped September 19th, so about 1 year after Season 1. If they made a season of this every September, I'd be delighted. Just a blast. An absolute joy yet again. This was once again 4 shorts, all checking in just south of 30 minutes, even less than that when you factor in the credits. You can blaze through each episode, blaze through the season. Look, is the intention of this at some level to sell merch, to move Lego sets? Are there entire and repeated sections of the new season where you just move through ship after ship after ship after ship that our beloved Force Builder is redesigning and innovating in real time? Yeah, and guess what? That's part of the joy. That's part of the fun. Do I want to buy a lot of new Lego sets after watching this? I do. Did it work on me? Am I an easy mark? It did. I am. Sorry. The story is also really fun. Just like Season 1, this is saturated in the kind of meta humor that, while I think the Lego Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy, both seasons are like really fun for newer Star Wars fans and for kids, I think this is actually like most rewarding for Star Wars fans who have history with the universe and can really appreciate all of the in-jokes and the meta humor. There is a new joke every couple minutes that stems from lovingly, lightly, lovingly poking at some aspect of prior Star Wars canon. I won't spoil all of the particular jokes for you, obviously. I will just say that there is a Snoke clones joke waiting for you that is not to be missed. Once again, because the Rebuild the Galaxy series is really interested in engaging with the wide swath of Star Wars canon. There are a lot of deep cuts in here. There's some Legends canon incorporated and nodded at, gaming canon incorporations. This is just an embrace, a wide embrace and a big warm hug to Star Wars fandom and to consuming Star Wars in so many different forms. The deep cuts this season are really a treat and not to be missed. This is also, once again, kind of a fever dream for Star Wars fans and very rooted in the internet era of memedom. And you know this already. It's not a spoiler because he was here last time, but listen, I'll just tell you, Darth Jar Jar is back and once again an absolute thrill to spend time with. Maul is here. He's singing. And if there's ever going to be something that compels Joanna to consume Lego Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy, it's going to be Maul singing, I think. So is this a moment? Maybe we'll find out together. Let me just say, in a way that will surprise none of you to hear, the Landalorian and Grogu deliver. On the fever dream front, something like the Porgil, which is a mashup of porgs and purgils, it's the kind of thing where you're like, give me the merch now, but also, what a joy, thrill, treat, honor to get to put something like that on screen. It's just a blast. Just really a good time and a blast. Yet again, this season likes to play with our expectations for Star Wars. Say, what are we accustomed to on the old redemption arc front? And then, invert our expectations. A lot of that, this is really one of the core structures of the series, is rooted in flipping many of the dark side, light side dynamics. Got a real kick this time around out of my gal, one of my wives, Asajj Ventress here, not with the Night Sisters, but with the Day Sisters, for example. On the Obi-Wan front, I'll just say this: red is his color. It's a little Clone Wars reference for you all. He might say it's not, but it is. Here's the thing. Every color is Obi-Wan's color. And yes, he is still hot as a Lego. There was a rule of two joke this season that I just got such a kick out of and think you all will enjoy. And if it sounds like I'm talking about a lot of the particulars, guess what? You got a treasure trove of additional references waiting for you still. There are also some really interesting story beats, not just with the character dynamics between Sig and Dev and Jedi Bob, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Many of your favorites from Star Wars enter in the chat this season who weren't here in the first season, but some interesting lore beats, the Force Hold, intriguing stuff. I see your Force Dyad and I raise you the Force Myriad. Ooh, enticing. As is always the case with any Lego Star Wars story, this is very rooted in the idea of building relationships, building the kind of life you want to live, and very rooted as well in the spirit of play, which of course is true both to Star Wars fandom and to Lego enthusiasm. And yet again, it works. So if you haven't yet, treat yourself to Lego Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy, Pieces of the Past / Season 2. You won't regret it, I promise.
What's up, Bringerverse Nation? It's your boy Jomi, and this month, for the month of October, I'm recommending Dispatch, the episodic video game by Ad Hoc Studios. It stars Aaron Paul as Mecha Man. He's a superhero with no powers at this point, so he got to go to a dispatch job and dole out jobs to a former group of supervillains that are looking to be good. And you know how good this game is? I stopped playing Ghost of Yote to play this game because the noise is crazy. If you've ever played Telltale, it's just like that. The decisions that you make in the game affect the story. It's a ton of fun. They got, a great voice acting cast, and I'm having a lot of fun shaping this world. It's new. It's enjoyable. It's a nice breath of fresh air. Somebody who plays 3 games a year, it's nice to have 2. But right now, sorry, I got to kill the kitsune, but I'm first got to save the city. Recommending Dispatch for October 2025.
All right, it's Ben with you one more time, and accompanied this time by the great Grumpkin, as promised. If you were intrigued by Jomi's Dispatch pick at the end there, stay tuned for upcoming Dispatch coverage on Button Mash when its season concludes in mid-November. Lots of video games on our episode today. Lots of Star Wars, too. Who says Star Wars is dead after Andor? There's a little life left in the old franchise, but no anime today because Chuck wasn't with us. Don't worry. Ringerverse listeners to the rescue. Our listener submission for this month, sent to ringerverserecommends@gmail.com, where we welcome your nominations for next month, comes from JB Bonifacio, who writes, Demon Slayer Infinity Castle will likely be the highest grossing comic book movie of the year, and it deserves every penny. Now, having said that, Chainsaw Man the movie, Reize Arc, deserves your penny just as much, and I'll tell you why. The first thing you must understand is that the creator of Chainsaw Man, Tatsuki Fujimoto, is not your average anime creator. At his core, Fujimoto is a cinephile at heart. Season 1 of Chainsaw Man, which is available on Crunchyroll and Hulu, draws as much inspiration from other anime like Neon Genesis Evangelion as he does from the works of Quentin Tarantino, like Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So when I say that Reize Arc's first half is inspired by Richard Linklater's The Before trilogy, please know that I'm telling the truth. I believe you, JB. You will cheer for the main characters, Denji and Reize, the same way you cheer for Jesse and Celine. The second thing you must understand is that while the first half of Reize Arc is vintage Linklater, the second half of Reize Arc is chaos incarnate, as complications very much ensue amid Denji and Reize's meet-cute. The two fight scenes in the second half between Denji and both Bomb Devil and Typhoon Devil are some of the most kinetic and over-the-top animation I've seen in my human existence. And I say this now having just seen Infinity Castle, and that's a high bar to meet. The last thing to understand is that unlike Demon Slayer Infinity Castle, you don't need to watch 60 episodes to catch up. The first season is only 12 episodes. And even then, Reize Arc is a self-contained story, so feel free to go in without preparation. You're welcome, Ringerverse. Thank you, JB. And you know what? I'm feeling generous today. I'm going to be like the house you go to when you're trick-or-treating and they say, you know what? Take 2 pieces of candy or 4, because our mailbox was overflowing this month with anime, or at least with animation. And here's a submission we got from a listener named Pearson Ray, who said that instead of seconding that Chainsaw Man recommendation, Pearson wants to shine a spotlight on a lesser-seen anime film this month. That would be 100 Meters, adapted from the manga by Uoto, who is also known for Orb on the Movements of the Earth. This sports drama follows 2 runners, Togashi, a naturally gifted sprinter who seems to win effortlessly, and Komiya, who lacks talent but pushes obsessively to prove himself. What's unique about this film is that it uses rotoscoping to great effect, resulting in a fluid and dynamic depiction of competitive running. It really brings out the physical strain on their bodies and rhythm of the races. The film also asks questions like, why do we run? I've wondered that myself while running. And why do we do something when we no longer feel the reason? There were also some stylistic choices and key moments of the film that were truly stunning. 100 Meters only had a short theatrical run, but it should be available on streaming soon, though I'm not sure what platform yet. Available in sub and dub. And of course, my policy tends to be sub over dub, but your mileage may vary. I got more where that came from. Here's one from listener Colleen McMillan, who also considered recommending Chainsaw Man, but says instead, I'm here to hype a new anime series that debuted in October called May I Ask for One Final Thing. Demon Slayer and Chainsaw Man belong to the shonen category, but this show is like if a shoujo and isekai had a gorgeous, violent baby. Shoujo. Apologies for my mispronunciation. Shoujo content is usually geared toward young women, and isekai is a subgenre where a character is transported to another world. This show is one of the most popular this quarter, with a lot of buzz spreading after the first episode. The series follows Scarlet, a duke's daughter engaged to the kingdom's second prince, who is wrongfully accused of being devoid of emotions. We've all been there. Publicly dumped and humiliated by her fiancé as a bully and villainous, Scarlet decides to let her freak flag fly and beats the absolute shit out of every person who witnessed her humiliation. Armed with brass knuckle gloves and a bloodthirst never seen in the kingdom, Scarlet turns from secluded noblewoman to hunter of the corrupt. She takes down slave traders and morally bankrupt nobles with gleeful fisticuffs. Her antics entrance Julius, the calculating but just first prince, and mortify her spymaster brother. But Scarlet doesn't give them much thought. Her mission is to destroy those who've wronged her. In the shadows lurks a girl with pink hair who is transported from another world. Usually, the hero of an isekai story would be this pink-haired girl, but our focus is on villainess Scarlet. It's a fun interpretation of the trope and is endlessly hilarious. While there are other fantastic new titles this quarter, Scarlet and Her Fists stand out the most. And last, but not least, we also got a recommendation from Sam Rashada, which is one that I've been meaning to check out too. Splinter Cell Death Watch on Netflix. Yeah, Splinter Cell's back, everyone. Splinter Cell is surprisingly very good, Sam says. It gives the feel of a live-action American drama despite it being animated. It takes time with its character development, and even if you're not into the Tom Clancy books or video games, the story is pretty self-contained, enough for you to understand all the character motivations. I highly recommend this because we need more adult animation, especially American, to take seriously. People who appreciate a Lioness live-action show, which I do, will love Splinter Cell. Well, thanks, everyone. Keep the recommendations coming to ringiverserecommends@gmail.com. And now I've got to remind you what you just heard. Everyone, scribble it down. Take your notes pages out. Here you go. Our recommendations for October 2025 from Van, Star Wars Vision Season 3 on Disney+, from Jomi, Dispatch on Windows and PS5, Arjuna, Haunted Hotel on Netflix. Devin recommended the Tron Ares soundtrack, which you can listen to on Spotify without having to see Tron Ares. Matt James recommended Ball X Pit on just about every platform. Mal recommended Lego Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy Season 2 on Disney+. Steve recommended We Love Katamari, also on almost all platforms. JB, our listener, recommended Chainsaw Man the movie, in theaters now. And our other listeners recommended 100 Meters, May I Ask for One Final Thing, and Splinter Cell Death Watch. And that's the final thing for us today. That will do it for October. It's been a great month. We've got a lot coming up next month. Predator Badlands, The Running Man, Wicked, and yes, Stranger Things. Not to mention great games on Button Mash. We'll have a lot to give thanks for. Thank you to Steve Allman for helping produce this episode and to Devin Ronaldo for doing much of the filming. Thanks to you, as always, for listening. And until next month, we hope that you'll recommend The Ringerverse.